As I mentioned earlier, we will hear primarily the SpaceX core or the Crew Operations and Resource Engineer. That is the primary role in mission control that is responsible for communicating with the Crew-11 spacecraft. That individual is seated there on the left-hand side of your screen. That is SpaceX Hawthorne Mission Control. Also seated there, I believe I see my boss, SpaceX Vice President Bill Gerstenmaier, sitting there in the front row. This group of operators are standing by and monitoring Dragon's progress throughout this burn. Now, this particular maneuver that Dragon Endeavour is performing, this deorbit burn, is utilizing the 4 forward Draco thrusters. We say forward because that indicates that it's basically the language indicating that they're located at the top of the Dragon spacecraft. These 4 Draco thrusters, this is the last time that they will be utilized for this mission. This deorbit burn will last for a total of about 13 and a half minutes. Okay, we still got about 6 minutes left in this deorbit burn. As we wait for a conclusion of the deorbit burn, let's talk about Dragon Endeavour's journey from the space station so far. Shortly after its separation, Dragon used its Draco thrusters to move away from the station in a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers, or departure burns, and those were done to increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. Dragon also executed a phasing burn to lower its orbit and line the spacecraft up with its landing location. Following the phasing burns, Dragon is now completing its deorbit, which will be followed by reentry and splashdown. During the deorbit sequence, several things will happen, including trunk separation, closure of the nose cone, as well as deployment of the drogue and main parachutes, ultimately followed by splashdown.
Again, if you're just joining us, this is the live coverage of NASA's SpaceX Crew-11 mission return to Earth. We are currently in the deorbit burn, which started at 1:51 a.m. Central Time, 2:51 a.m. Eastern Time. It's expected to last approximately 13 minutes, so we still have about 4 more minutes left of this burn. Once it's complete, Dragon will then proceed to jettison the trunk before it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere, exposing the heat shield on the base of the spacecraft and protecting the crew as they make their way toward the splashdown location. And we are anticipating splashdown at 3:41 a.m. Eastern, 2:41 a.m. Central Time off the coast of California.
We have just over a minute remaining in this 13.5-minute burn. This is the deorbit burn. This is the final burn for the forward Draco thrusters. It is placing Dragon on its final trajectory to the splashdown location off the coast of California. We're targeting one of our 3 pre-designated locations. This one will be just off the coast of San Diego. Shortly after the burn concludes, we should hear a call out indicating that the burn was nominal. This would be
this view of Endeavour
that we are continuing with progression of our milestones. After deorbit burn, we will jettison the trunk and have atmospheric reentry. All right, so there's about 10 seconds left in this burn, so we're going to stand by and listen for that call out.
Dragon, SpaceX, deorbit burn complete. Performance nominal. Trunk separation initiated.
Dragon copy. Nominal deorbit burn. Trunk separation process initiated.
Okay, good words there from SpaceX Core, letting our Crew-11 team know that the deorbit burn was as expected. Now, to prepare for these upcoming events, Dragon is currently doing a couple of things autonomously, such as isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep the internal temperature of Dragon comfortable during the crew's reentry. Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism, which will terminate all data, power, and fluid connections between the spacecraft and the trunk, and that is all done in preparation for trunk separation.
Nominal trunk jettison.
Dragon copies.
All right, great news there. We heard the call out for a successful trunk separation. So that means that telemetry is looking good. The nitrox system is primed for cabin and suit cooling, and the heat shield is exposed and ready for atmospheric entry. Now, since we separated the trunk, we are no longer able to generate any new power, but we don't need to since we're coming on home and Dragon has more than enough battery power already stored. So the next milestone that we have coming up is nose cone closure. We expect that at approximately 12:09 a.m., so here in about 3 minutes. The nose cone is at the top of the spacecraft, and it is the structure that protects the docking system as well as the guidance, navigation, and control system. We'll be using 12 hooks to lock and secure the nose cone prior to its atmospheric entry.
That's right. We are standing by for nose cone closure, expected just a few minutes from now. And as you can tell, things are picking up a little bit more quickly as we prepare for splashdown. Again, expecting that to come at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, 3:41 a.m. Eastern. So right now, Dragon is inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters. We just used those to complete the deorbit burn, meaning they will not fire again, and ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone for reentry. The vehicle has, we are also anticipating it to initiate the nitrox suit purge. This helps keep our crew members, Zena Cardman, Mike Fink, Kim Yui, and Oleg Platonov, cool and comfortable during reentry, which we're expecting in about 20 minutes. At this point, the nose cone, we are standing by for that closure to begin, protecting that forward hatch for reentry. And the crew will be able to use their screens to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by that set of hooks. Underneath the nose cone is also the hatch that the crew members use to ingress and egress, also known as enter and exit, the International Space Station while the spacecraft was docked. Now, once they splash down, they'll be using the side hatch to exit the spacecraft and onto the recovery ship. That side hatch is what they used to enter Dragon back in August when they launched to the space station.
For those of you that have just recently joined us for Crew-11 splashdown, we have completed the deorbit burn that set Dragon on its precise trajectory back to our splashdown location off the coast of San Diego, California. We've also jettisoned the trunk, and we've just closed the nose cone. So these are the final physical changes for the Dragon spacecraft prior to its atmospheric entry. And we expect that entry period to begin about 12:30 a.m. Pacific time, so in about 20 minutes or so. We also expect the crew to receive their final entry briefing. This is where the SpaceX core will communicate any changed details, such as timeline shifts to the anticipated loss of signal and acquisition of signal, as well as the entry period. We should also find out what the wave height and wind speed is there at the splashdown location. But when I was coming into work this evening, I did see some stars outside, so hopefully that's a good indication that we've got some smooth seas out there awaiting the crew.
As we are in the process of the hooks and latches driving to secure and close the nose cone, just a recap of what we've seen so far tonight. The spacecraft undocked from the International Space Station earlier today. This Crew-11, spent 165 days aboard the orbiting laboratory, but 167 days in space altogether if you count the time they have spent getting to and from the space station. At 1:51 a.m. Central Time, 2:51 a.m. Eastern, the spacecraft executed the deorbit burn. That was an approximately 13-minute long burn, committing the spacecraft to coming home and splashing down off the coast of California. We're anticipating that splashdown in less than 30 minutes from now, 2:41 a.m. Central. After the nose cone closes, we will begin seeing our reentry process, and part of that is a communications blackout. We lose communication with the spacecraft. This is an anticipated and tracked milestone as they go through reentry and plasma builds up around the spacecraft itself. We do regain that communications shortly thereafter, and following that, we anticipate seeing drogue parachutes deployed. There are 2 of those, as well as 4 main parachutes, slowing down the spacecraft to a splashdown time of, again, 2:41 a.m. Central Time. So we're just standing by for confirmation of nose cone closure.
Dragon SpaceX, nose cone secured for entry.
Dragon.
Okay, we heard good news there. The nose cone is closed and secured, locked in position, ready for atmospheric reentry. Now, as we begin the second half of entry, Dragon has begun to inject cooled nitrox or nitrogen-oxygen mixture into the air, being delivered directly into the suits worn by the crew. Again, this is what will allow our crew members to remain comfortable while external temperatures reach up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, the heat shield is pointing forward, essentially leading Dragon to our landing site just off the coast of San Diego, which is important as it will be doing a lot of the work during this reentry. So let's talk a bit more about the heat shield. Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of PICA 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. Now, the first gen PICA was actually initially developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system. SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop PICA X, which was the second gen product.
Dragon SpaceX for entry briefing. Report when ready to copy.
Ready to copy.
Okay, starting with timeline. We're completely on time for the previously briefed timeline. Splashdown period displays at 0841 Zulu. Com blackout start 0828. Blackout end 0835. How copy?
Copy, we are on time for 0841 splashdown per the timeline. Com blackout start 0828. Com blackout end 0835.
That's a good readback. We have a nominal vehicle status. We're tracking an on-target arrival to San Diego with pristine weather conditions for splashdown. Recovery team is on site and ready to support.
Dragon copies. Nominal vehicle, excellent weather, and teams are ready to support.
And with that, please report when tablets are secure, restraints are tightened, and visors are down.
SpaceX Dragon, tablets secure, restraints tightened, and visors down.
SpaceX copies all.
All right, so as expected, that was our entry brief to the crew, letting them know that there were actually no updates to the anticipated timeline this morning. So that's great news. Everything is looking well on time with our anticipated timeline. So as we mentioned before, we expect our anticipated loss of signal to occur around 12:28 a.m. Pacific. So in just about 8 minutes from now, we anticipate that signal to be regained or anticipate that signal to be acquired again at 12:35 a.m. Pacific time. Now, sometimes we are able to hail the crew a little bit earlier than that, and sometimes we get those communications back. And then once again, splashdown at 12:41 a.m. Pacific. So again, if you're in Southern California, head outside and look up. Now, let's get back to talking a little bit about the heat shield. As you know, we're talking about this signal loss, and that's due to part of what's going on with that heat shield. So SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop the second generation heat shield product, and that was actually used on all of the Dragon 1 CRS missions that resupplied the space station on 20 missions. Then fast forwarding to PICA 3.0, that was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo with enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and drove down cost and mass. So the remainder of Dragon is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. That's another class of thermal protection, which is lighter weight versus PICA and protects the underlying composite structure during the reentry phase, and that's to ensure the structural capabilities of the spacecraft are maintained. Now, while Dragon will experience temperatures over 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit peak during those peak reentry conditions, the characteristics of the thermal protection systems, or TPS as you hear it called, coupled with the environmental control and life support, or ECLIS, that system will be pressurizing the interior, and all those combined will ensure that the crew will stay cool and comfortable during all phases of reentry through splashdown.
SpaceX Dragon,
Okay, so
opening seat previsor just to adjust glasses.
Dragon SpaceX, can you repeat?
opening seat 3 visor to adjust glasses.
Copy, adjusting glasses. Your go for that.
Okay, so that was important to note there because our commander, Zena Cardman, had already reported back that all visors were down and in the locked position ready for atmospheric reentry, but one of our crew members had to adjust their glasses. So she did a good job there in reporting back to SpaceX crew to let them know that one of the crew members had to reopen momentarily.
Visors are down.
We copy. Visors are down. 5 minutes until predicted calm blackout. See you on the other side at 0835.
Copy 0835. Talk to you soon.
Okay, so as we have been saying, everything that Dragon and the crew on board does is carefully choreographed, not just the maneuvers that the spacecraft is executing, but the communications between our crew here on the ground and our crew in space. So, Leah, we can see all of that being perfectly demonstrated with what's going on now.
Absolutely, and we are standing by for the reentry portion when we expect to lose communications with the spacecraft, but we will regain that communication after they have begun re-entering the atmosphere. So once Dragon has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a series of parachutes will deploy to slow the crew's descent. First will be the 2 drogue chutes, followed by the 4 main chutes to guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since launching in August. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the spacecraft detect that they are at the right speed and altitude. The spacecraft velocity at drogue deploy is approximately 350 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 18,000 feet. You're getting a live look inside the cabin right now. That's Crew-11 preparing for their re-entry period. Again, having spent 165 days aboard the space station, and when they splash down, capping a 167-day mission. Before they can splash down, though, a little bit more about those parachutes. The next that we will see deploy will be the main parachutes. There are 4 of those. They deploy at approximately 119 miles per hour, or I should say when the spacecraft is traveling about 119 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 65,000 feet. And at splashdown, Dragon is traveling approximately 16 miles per hour, which is a pretty good deceleration from the about 17,500 miles per hour that they were traveling while in Earth orbit with the International Space Station. Now, the highest G load the crew will experience during re-entry is approximately 3 to 5 Gs, so about 3 to 5 times what we are experiencing right now standing on Earth. This view is over the shoulder of Commander Zena Cardman and pilot Mike Fink of the Crew-11 spacecraft. In this view, you can see their crew displays. They're able to monitor everything happening with the spacecraft. However, all the next milestones should be completely autonomous and hands-off for the crew. And we just heard that the crew is in entry attitude, and we are anticipating losing this view and losing our audio communications with the crew in just a minute or so as they enter this entry interface. They'll be traveling and experiencing heat outside the capsule at approximately 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And as they are traveling and re-entering Earth's atmosphere, a plasma builds up around the capsule that prevents us from communicating back and forth with the crew. We expect to regain communications with them about 7 minutes later, but we're still getting great views right now.
I love this view over their shoulders because you can see what our pilot and commander can see. They're continuing to follow along with Dragon's progress. As Leah mentioned, we have designed the spacecraft to be completely autonomous. Dragon is flying itself, so they are able to monitor along with everything that's going on. I also want to momentarily point out on the bottom of your screen there, you have some graphical interfaces there that represent the speed and the altitude. And it looks like we've lost our views there as that, we are now entering the period of anticipated loss of signal. This is where, as Leah mentioned, the plasma is beginning to build up on the exterior of the capsule as we expect. This happens with every spacecraft reentry for Dragon, and so this lasts just a few minutes. But I want to momentarily note that there on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you can actually see something pretty cool where when one of the Draco thrusters ignite to fire and help steer the spacecraft, you will actually see that there represented on the interface there. Now the four in the middle, those are representing the four forward Draco thrusters. We won't see those ignite at all because those were last utilized in the 13-minute deorbit burn that we completed earlier. Those are located under the nose cone, which has been closed, locked, and secured. So everything that you'll be seeing are the thrusters that are located on the side of our spacecraft, and that is enabling Dragon to fly itself home to its predetermined splashdown site off the coast of San Diego, California. For about a minute and a half until we have that atmospheric reentry. Once again, if you're in Southern California, head on outside and look up. There's a good chance that you might be able to actually see Dragon streak across the sky, look toward about the north and the west. As we mentioned before, we have entered a communications blackout period, which lasts about 7 minutes due to the plasma formation on the exterior of the capsule. We've got about 5 minutes remaining until we believe we can acquire that signal again. Now, during this time, no vehicle telemetry is received by Mission Control or the recovery team, and no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication is possible. But like I was saying, Dragon is designed to fly itself. During this reentry, the vehicle will be slowing down from its orbital velocity of about 17,500 miles per hour. And it's slowing down. The atmosphere is really doing a lot of the work in conjunction with that heat shield to dispel that velocity. That results in heat, and that is why we have this plasma building up on the exterior of the spacecraft. It'll slow down to about 350 miles per hour, thanks to the heat shield and the atmosphere. And so at that point, we'll deploy the drogue parachutes. But during reentry, the top temperature that Dragon experiences will be about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So pretty warm on the outside, but there is cool nitrox air being flowed through the suits that each crew member is wearing. So we ensure that they remain comfortable during this brief journey through the atmosphere.